Good afternoon and welcome to Patriot Pets. My name is Lake Green and today we are in Batsto, New Jersey, deep in the New Jersey Pinelands, visiting Batsto Historic Village. A very interesting and awesome site, an early example of American industry in the period before the American Revolution, during, and after the era of good feelings and the early antebellum period. Well, let's check it out. So it's no coincidence that behind me there is a massive pile of limonite, also the prime resource for bog iron. And of course, as I said, this village of Batsto revolved around iron for nearly 100 years. In 1766, Charles Reed, the most notable iron master and the first iron master at Batsto, and I said the most notable meaning he was the most notable iron master in what was West New Jersey before the American Revolution, founded the first iron foundry at this location. By 1779, he had sold a share to Joseph Ball of his foundry here, and during the American Revolution, Batsto became a massive and important supplier for the American Continental Army, casting anything from camp kettles, cannonballs, and iron canisters, wheels for wagons, and ammunition caissons. So it was an integral part in supplying the American war effort. Another fun fact, at Mount Vernon in Virginia, George Washington's famed estate, the iron mantles above his fireplaces were all cast at Batsto and at Zion Iron Works, which is a little northwest of here in the New Jersey Pinelands. So very interesting. So, as I said earlier, Joseph Ball was the first proprietor of this iron foundry, but by 1773, Mr. John Cox purchased most of this estate, and then, as I said earlier, sold it to Joseph Ball. And of course, it was a major supplier for American munitions during the Revolutionary War. And there's no coincidence for that, because this estate was built along the Batsto River, and back then, horse and buggy and boat were the only efficient ways of transportation, and massive boats filled with iron munitions, cast and uncast, were shipped up the Batsto River, actually to the Little Egg Harbor, and American privateers and pirates could also sail up and down the East Coast and distribute them to all along the colonies, or further up the Batsto River into smaller tributaries and into the Delaware River, most notably during Washington's 1778 encampment at Valley Forge. And by 1784, after the American Revolution, Mr. Cox sold the estate to the Richards family, and William Richards was the first Richards, and his family and his sons, his descendants, his sons and grandsons ran this Batsto Iron Works for over 92 years. And up through the 1850s, they really focused on iron production. He built that original house, even though this, like I said, the Italianate structure was actually made to look like that by the Whartons, Joseph Wharton, who purchased this estate in 1867, I do believe. But before that, the original foundations on that building were built by the Richards family in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, where he lived with his family, and multiple generations lived there. They became very wealthy and prosperous, and like I said, much like we saw at Alair State Park, they would just go in the tea-colored waters. Like I said, the tea-colored waters weren't just tea-colored because of the pines and the tannins from the natural deposits, but also because of the natural deposits of iron present in the waters and the bogs. So they would just have men go into the water with tools, dig out the bottoms and the banks, massive chunks of ore as we showed earlier, and smelt them in the furnace. The furnace is no longer standing here at this works, but we saw an early example at Alair State Park. So if you're interested in seeing what one looks like, just go to the Alair State Park video and you'll be able to get a very good feel for it. So most of the buildings on this property were built by the Richards family and his descendants, his sons Thomas and Jesse and his grandsons. But by the mid-1850s, as more strong, efficient, and more accessible deposits of iron ore were found in the northern Pennsylvania Appalachian Mountains. The bog iron industry here in New Jersey, which was truly costly and very intensive, labor intensive in terms of production, disintegrated. And between 1852 and the 1860s, the glass industry rose here. Of course, no coincidence either. The sandy soil is perfect for making glass, because there's a lot of quartz in the sand here, which really allowed for very good glass production. They specialized in street lamps and just like lamps and that type of glass, window panes. But after only a decade or so, even that ran into financial decline, and by 1867 it had fallen into receivership, and that is how Joseph Wharton was able to purchase the estate, which he turned into a gentleman farm, which he ran and lived with his family in the summers, cultivating everything from livestock to cranberries until his death in 1909. So truly an early rich area of New Jersey history and that of American history. So many things were made here on these iron works, from anything to cannonballs, muskets, kettles, pots, George Washington's fireplace mantelets, and in the 1800 years, pipes for the city of Philadelphia and New York, street lamps, posts, and everything in between. So Batsto Village, a truly historic place in New Jersey history. So as we've done in almost every past historical site that I've visited, we always show the little ones. And this is an ice house and a milk house. So obviously before refrigeration, you had to preserve your food. And in the wintertime, they would cut ice out of lakes and streams that had frozen solid and store them in deep, deep houses that went deep underground. It's hard to see through that because there's glass on top of it, but it's at least 10 feet deep underneath the soil. And that's where they store their ice. And that is the milk house, the door there, which we can take a look inside as I walk over, where they would make milk and butter. So behind me is the Batsto Post Office, operated and opened in 1852. It is the oldest post office in New Jersey and one of the oldest in the United States. In 1852, with President Millard Fillmore in command of the United States government federally, the Batsto Post Office was opened, and Mr. Jesse Richards was placed in charge of its operations, and the building next to it is the general store. Well, right in this field in front of me is where the second industry here at Batsto took off, the glass factory. In the 1840s, the iron industry started to fail, as I said, due to competition from new iron industries in Pennsylvania. And to keep it profitable, Jesse Richards, the grandson of William Richards, built the window glass factory on this site. And in 1852, Camden was lit up with thousands of lamps manufactured right here. The sawmill off in the distance and the spire to the mansion. And so this was a worker's home. There's your candle, your fireplace, some food, a hearth. After Joseph Wharton purchased Batsto in 1878, the rent for a worker's home was $2 a month. Also, rules printed on the workers' timesheets. Living and working at Batsto, these farm included morning chores, including breakfast, must be done before 6 in the morning, at which time the bell would ring and the work would begin. No unnecessary talking or unnecessary noise at any sort of smoking during work hours. And the gates must be shut. Wow. No laziness. Wow. And this was, I guess, built in the 1870s by Joseph Wharton. And there's your sleeping quarters. This is just an interesting tidbit. Many of the families of the village have been living here for generations. They intermarried and shared their lives over the years. Some of the early names were Ford, Miller, Bozarth, Taylor, Leake, Coleman, Holloway, Bowie, Moore, Crowley. Of course, Crowley's Landing is not far from here on the river. Adams, Southard, Taylor, and Allen. Many of these families have been at Batsto since the iron manufacturing days, and their descendants still live in the area today. And the general store supplied the needs of all of the villagers and bought on credit flour, sugar, butters, molasses, tons of them. So I often say, folks, that most of southern New Jersey is much more like the South than it is like the North or the West. And today is living proof, because look at what I found on the floor here for you nature lovers. Native New Jersey cactus. I'm assuming they are native. I will affirm that in the slide after this clip. But my good colleague here, who is a native of Maryland, knows that they are native to Delaware. So cactus. Unbelievable. In New Jersey.